Thank you. We're very fortunate tonight to have David Alessandris, who is one of the most prominent young philatelists in the United States. And by young, I mean anyone younger than me is young, and there's not that many, believe it or not, at this level. He's a known researcher and author and speaker, and he has been in prominent leadership positions. He just finished his term as president of the very prestigious U.S. Philatelic Classic Society, and he has multiple collecting interests, mostly, if I remember correctly, a maritime mail of the maritime provinces of Canada, Maine, early steamship mail of that area, and the subject of tonight's presentation, the Lanman and Kemp correspondence. David?
Okay, let me share the screen here. And there we go. So thank you, Yamil. When Yamil first contacted me, he said that a lot of the members here, collect postal history, and so you all have Lanman and Kemp covers in your collection, and he thought it might be interesting to have me talk about what I know about the Lanman and Kemp correspondence. And so I'm going to concentrate on the firm history and the what I know about the Lanman and Kemp correspondence, how they kept their records, how this material came to the market, what came to the market, how it was dispersed. And then I'll also talk about Lanman and Kemp's revenue stamps, some of Lanman and Kemp's ephemera that you see on eBay type of things. And then I'll talk a little bit, it is a postal history group, so I will show a few covers. And one of the things that I find most interesting is how you can show the different mail routes that were used by correspondents, all going into one company in New York. So Lanman and Kemp's history, it was established in 1808 by somebody named Robert I. Murray. The company was located in Lower Manhattan at 313 Pearl Street. In 1835, it was renamed Murray and Lanman. They subsequently moved, still in Lower Manhattan, to 69 Water Street. In about 1853, the company was renamed David T. Lanman and Company. At that point, he was in partnership with George Kemp, but Kemp wasn't a named partner until 1858, when they changed the name to D.T. Lanman and Kemp. And then in 1861, they changed the name again just to Lanman and Kemp. And in 1870, they moved again to 68 William Street, which is at the corner of William and Cedar Streets in Lower Manhattan. And the billhead there, the engraving at the top left, is the Lanman and Kemp building at the corner of William and Cedar Street. In 1900, they moved back to Water Street at 135 Water. The company was subsequently renamed Lanman and Kemp Barclay and Company. Barclay was another patent medicine manufacturing company. In 1920, they incorporated as Lanman and Kemp Barclay and Company Incorporated. In 1957, they moved across the Hudson River to Palisades Park, New Jersey. In 1973, they moved to Westwood, New Jersey. And that 1973 date is going to be important later on in the presentation, so keep that in mind. In 2008, the company celebrated its 200th anniversary, and they're still in business today. They're still innovating. In 2020, they introduced Florida Water hand sanitizer, which was produced because of the COVID pandemic. So Lanman and Kemp, they had retail lines of production, and they also did wholesale trading. They had a number of patent medicines. Patent medicines is the term we use in the US, what used to also be called like snake oil or the things the hucksters would go from town to town selling. There were a lot of those medicines back before the Pure Food and Drug Act. Lanman and Kemp is still around and still selling stuff, so that wasn't, they weren't selling the crazy remedies, but their main products, retail products, were the Florida Water, which is a perfume, Bristol's pills, Kemp's worm pastilles, and DT Lanman and Company's pure cod liver oil. They were also wholesale druggists, and they sold wholesale drugs and supplies. If you actually open up, the correspondence, the letters that you have to Lanman and Kemp, a lot of times you'll see that there are orders for all sorts of different supplies. If you were opening a drugstore anywhere in the world, basically, you could order from Lanman and Kemp everything you needed, not just their patent medicines for you to resell, but also you could order any sort of supplies that a drugstore would need, the bottles and corks and scales, raw materials that you would use to make your own medicines, calcium or vitamins or extracts from different plants and flowers and whatnot that were used to make medicine back in the 1860s. Lanman and Kemp was also very heavily involved in the opium trade. They had a fairly extensive correspondence with China. I've got a number of Augustine Herd prices current from China. Of course, these came in envelopes, so it's just the contents, just the folded prices current with no postal markings or philatelic content. There's also a lot of correspondence with Turkey and a lot of correspondence with the UK, with other opium wholesalers in London, trying to correspond about market conditions in the opium market conditions. So to understand the Lanman and Kemp correspondence, you have to kind of understand their record keeping. And not surprisingly, they kept files arranged by the name of the customer and the date. And so when incoming correspondence came in, if it was a folded letter, they unfolded it and they docketed the outer letter sheet. If it came in an envelope, the envelope was discarded and they kept the letter and they wrote their docketing on the actual correspondence. This is nothing special, but actually a very interesting item, just showing an example of a complete intact Lanman and Kemp record. And so this has the incoming letter from the customer, and this wasn't a folded letter. This is just actual, letter contents that came in an envelope with the docketing on it. And then it has the invoice, the bill head, responding, they wrote in saying they wanted to order, X, and then there's a bill head saying, here we're shipping you X, and then there's the bill of lading, and all the documents for that transaction were pinned together. You can see a pin in the upper left. And I think this is the only one of these I've seen, actually showing an intact piece of correspondence for a transaction, because generally, the pin got removed and it was separated, and the different documents got sent here and there, but all the documents tie together. And so I mentioned the Lanman and Kemp docketing, and on a typical Lanman and Kemp folded letter, on the front, you'll see a blue A, which I assume means answered. And then there's a scribble next to it, which is kind of an AU or AW. And my assumption is that those are the initials of the person that answered the letter, the employee at Lanman and Kemp. Sometimes you'll see where dealers erase those markings, trying to improve the look of the cover. I've also seen auction descriptions where they describe that blue A as being a postal marking found on, mail carried from the Caribbean. On the back of the cover, you'll see the docketing with the sender's name, the city of origin, the date of the letter, the date the letter was received by Lanman and Kemp in New York, and then the date the letter was answered. And you can see here on this cover, the answered date of September 3 is in a different ink than the other information. So obviously, clerk, when it was answered, went in and filled in the last information on the docketing. So there was a find of Lanman and Kemp material. And there's a lot of conflicting stories out there about it. I don't know what happened. The facts, as I can determine, sort of incontrovertible information, is that it involved a collector dealer named Richard Michelli. And it occurred around 1973 when Lanman and Kemp relocated from Palisades Park to Westwood in New Jersey. I've heard different stories. Some of them are very fanciful. And repeatedly people tell me, oh, this is the true story. I heard it from Michelli myself. I actually corresponded with Michelli about 15 years ago, and he refused to tell me the story of the find. He said that he was protecting his intellectual property because he was going to write the story. I actually Googled, preparing for this talk, Googled Michelli, and it looks like he passed away about 8 years ago. So he apparently took the story to the grave with him. The story I've heard the most often, and I think the least likely to be true, is that Michelli was just walking down the street in Lower Manhattan and saw these boxes on the curb where they had been discarded by a company. And so he, hailed a cab and fit what he could in the back of a cab and left the other material there. And when he went back, it was already gone. And so he only found, a portion, or he only saved a portion of what was out on the street. I've heard a variation of that where it was found, and he was in the real estate business, and he was, in a building that had been vacated, or was an abandoned building, or it was material that was, these were boxes of stuff that were left behind in a building, and that's how he found the material. I also heard a version that he, found it during a sales call at Lanman and Kemp, and it was, being discarded on the curb, and he said, hey, can I take that? And they said, oh yeah, go ahead, haul it away. Excuse me, the tree pollen here is terrible right now, and I'm getting a scratchy throat from it. The story I think that's the most likely is that Michelli was in the perfume business, and that's actually confirmed in his obituary at the time of the find. And I think he knew people at Lanman and Kemp, and the employees were told, hey, get rid of this stuff. And they said, hey, Michelli, give me some amount of money, and we'll let you know when this is going to the curb. And that would explain also possibly why he wasn't willing to discuss how he found it, because he might have been trying to protect an employee that might still be working at Lanman and Kemp. So what was in the find? Michelli didn't perform any inventory. As near as I can tell, there were about 150 to 200,000 items. And this is primarily the foreign business correspondence from about 1853 to 1879. You'll occasionally see a cover or two before 1853, and you'll see stuff after, excuse me, after 1879 with some frequency. I think it was stuff that was misfiled. So the correspondence, I think there's about, from what I've been able to track down, there's about 100 companies represented. Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Colombia are the most common origins. About 2/3 of the letters are from the Western Hemisphere. And so this is a map colored in. I have covers in my collection from the countries that are colored red. The blue countries, I know that there's at least a few letters from there. These might be letters without contents rather than postal covers. So how was this dispersed? The earliest documented information I know is that there was a Siegel sale in January of 1975, and these were bulk lots of forwarding agent covers, 30 covers, 50 covers in a lot, whatever. Michelli also took Boers tables in Boerses around New York City and attempted to sell stuff directly to prominent collectors. There's a lot of talk about how Michelli concealed the size of the find because there were, specific routings that were scarce before the Lanman and Kemp find, and had, fairly good market value. And if the collectors realized that suddenly that, these covers where they thought there were 2 or 3 of them, there's 20 or 30, that would, kill the pricing levels. So the correspondence with the letters without the envelopes, that's what went to Robert Dalton Harris. And Yamil, you asked me before we started about his inventory, his published inventory of the Lanman and Kemp correspondence. That's an inventory of just these letters without the outer envelope. Lanman and Kemp, in the find, there were also a lot of their checks, well, at least in the US until about 20 years ago, your bank would send you back your canceled checks each month. And so Lanman and Kemp had all these checks that wound up in the find. And those went to this dealer, Bob Humphrey. There were folded letters with the frankings removed, stamps cut off. And that some of that was donated to the ASDA, and some of it wound up with the US Philatelic Classic Society. As I mentioned, Lanman and Kemp retained the entire folded letter, but if it came in an envelope, they discarded the envelope. And there were about 62,000 of those letters. Robert Dalton Harris published an inventory of those, and that material is now at the Hagley Museum and Library in Wilmington, Delaware. And the web page for the Hagley Museum has a lot of information about these, 62,000 letters, including a lot of detailed information on, the origin, the cities and names of each of the correspondents. They've gone through the letters to find out what items were being ordered, and so they have a lot of detail in the finding guide on the web page with what types of things were being ordered, and a lot of information that they were able to extract from that business correspondence. Outgoing correspondence, which of course wouldn't have been part of the find because the letter was sent from Lanman and Kemp to some other country. The assumption, when they created the UPU, was each letter generates a response. You should have, roughly corresponding amounts of letters, going in each direction. But where are the outgoing letters? It's probably about 500 to 1, based on what I've seen of letters, from Lanman and Kemp to a foreign country versus incoming correspondence. I mentioned the letter sheets with stamps removed. There were about 20,000 of those that were apparently donated to the ASDA. I don't know what happened to those. There were about 5,000 that wound up with the US Philatelic Classic Society. The Classic Society digitized all of the covers, and it's available on the USPCS webpage. The Classic Society donated the originals to the APRL for preservation. The APRL sold the material, so these covers might wind up back on eBay at some point. And if you look at the letters with the stamps removed, they're typically cut off of the letter sheet, not soaked. And there was some selectivity in what stamps were removed, and is probably just only stamps with market value. And here's a cover that I have from Peru to New York with a UK 6-pence violet stamp with the C35 marking, so this is a UK stamp used in Peru. And there's another stamp that's been cut off the cover. This would be a fantastic cover if it was intact. And the reason they didn't cut off the other stamp is if you look at it, you can see that there was some of the perfs were torn off prior to use. You can see the cancel goes across where the damage is to the stamp, but somebody went through this we don't know when, maybe around 1900, and said, oh, well, that stamp's not worth anything, and didn't even bother cutting it off the cover. There are a few, more than a few, but a much smaller number of covers where the stamps were soaked off. This is a cover from Peru that has a steam Panama purser marking on it. And I own this cover, unfortunately. And I thought I was smarter than the PF. And I looked at it and I said, well, there's this was a 10-cent rate cover. And, somebody added a 3-cent stamp to the cover to make it look more desirable. So I can buy this and soak the 3-cent stamp off, and I'll have a nice steam Panama cover. Unfortunately, I soaked the stamp off and found the remains of a postmark underneath the stamp. Well, it was a double rate cover, and there was a 10-cent stamp there that had been soaked off, and whoever faked the cover put a 3-cent stamp on it for some reason. So if you see a Lanman and Kemp cover with a stamp on it, it might belong, it might not. But sort of my signs that a stamp belongs is that the stamp itself wouldn't be valuable off cover. So it's a low denomination stamp, off-centered, a straight edge, a file fold through the stamp damaged. And so you have this weird situation where a combination franking of a couple of low value stamps is more likely to be original than a single high value stamp, because the high value stamp would be worth more soaked off the cover. And so here's a cover, originating in the Caribbean, sent to St. Thomas, where a forwarding agent applied a US 10-cent stamp to the cover. So it's a US stamp used from abroad. I like the cover a lot, but it's got a straight edge stamp. And so back when they went through and rated the material, they didn't bother cutting the stamp off because it was a straight edge. The find also included a lot of financial documents, receipts, bills of lading, powers of attorney, customs fees, documents, consular documents, prices current, things like that. So I mentioned Lanman and Kemp's revenue stamps. So when the Civil War started, the government enacted a bunch of new taxes to pay for the war. And so the stamps were broadly, there were documentary stamps and proprietary stamps. The documentary stamps were stamps that applied to financial documents. So here, bill of ladings were taxed 10 cents, and this has a 10-cent stamp on it. But there were also taxes on what they referred to as proprietary items, which were matches, patent medicines, perfumes, playing cards, canned fruit. For a while, they applied to photographs, things like that. So you could use the government stamp, which here on the left, you can see there's a government first issue proprietary stamp with a Lanman and Kemp cancel on it. Or you could do something different, which is the manufacturer, you could pay to have your own design placed on a revenue stamp. And so this was before the government printed the stamps themselves. They were printed by private banknote companies. And so you could pay the banknote company to design a stamp for you to your specification, your design. And then when you ordered the stamps, you got a slight discount on the purchase of the stamps. And so a lot of companies realized the incredible advertising value that these stamps would have. And Lanman and Kemp was one of those companies. And you can see there are 3 Civil War issue stamps on the top, 1, 2, and 3 cent denominations. That tax ended in 1882 and then was reintroduced during the Spanish-American War, and they had 3 more stamps, and these were different tax rates. So the stamps were 5/8 cents, 1 1/4 cents, and 1 7/8 cents. Now, a lot of these companies, when they were using these private die stamps of their own, they would do a lot of marketing, look for our stamp, none genuine, make sure you're not buying some cheap imitation, look for the product with our private stamp on it. So what do you do when the war, when the taxes are repealed and you no longer need these stamps on your product? Well, a lot of the companies introduced what they call facsimile labels, where they would delete the words U.S. Internal Revenue and delete the denomination, and then just put these labels on their product that look like a tax stamp. And so Lanman and Kemp was one of those companies, and here are a few of their proprietary labels. The thing that I think is amazing is, 140 years later, Lanman and Kemp is still putting these facsimile labels on their Florida water. And so here's a picture of a bottle of Florida water that I bought, 10 years ago. And it now has like a foil version of the tax stamp, or the facsimile label that they still wrap around the top of the bottle. I mentioned the checks. There's Lanman and Kemp checks before there was a tax on the checks. There are Lanman and Kemp checks with adhesive government, revenue stamps. And then you could also get your checks with the revenue stamp already pre-printed on the check. So there's 7 different varieties of that tax imprint on Lanman and Kemp's checks. And if you consider they had different banks that they had accounts at, the names of the banks, the date, and the printer, there's 29 different varieties that I have of these Lanman and Kemp checks. This is something I found on eBay. I had no idea these existed, but apparently there was an equivalent of private die stamps in Argentina. And so these are proofs of a Argentine tax stamp with Lanman and Kemp, New York, in the design. I believe these were issued as actual tax stamps. I've never found one of the actual stamp. Talking about ephemera, and that there's also Lanman and Kemp advertising covers. These are quite scarce. This cameo design exists in blue also. I've seen maybe 3 of these cameo covers, so that they're not at all common. Other ephemera, there's just an indescribable number of trade cards. I've probably got over 100, and there's a lot of other designs out there. There's also trade card booklets, which are kind of like the size of a trade card, but it's like an 8-page booklet with their different advertising in it. Lanman and Kemp has published an almanac for many years. Here's a 1903 almanac, and you can see on the back it has the facsimile label illustrated on the back. And Lanman and Kemp is still producing that almanac today. This is the 2024 almanac. If you go to Lanman and Kemp's webpage, you can download a copy for free. Other ephemera, you can find bottles and cans. There's a Florida water bottle with the facsimile label wrapped around the neck of the bottle, and large and small cans of natural laxative for constipation. There's a 1-pound can and a 5-pound can. Unless you're a nursing home or something, I don't know what you would need a 5-pound can of laxative for, but they show up on eBay. So I mentioned talking about, showing a few covers, and what I like to see are the different mail routes that were used for correspondence into Lanman and Kemp in New York. And so this is just showing some of the mail routes from the east coast of South America. And basically before the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company, the kind of bluish line, the correspondence with, between New York and the east coast of South America basically all went via France or the UK. So they crossed the Atlantic Ocean twice. And there were three British companies operating on the route, and then a French mail route. And so I'll just show you quickly some of the different covers. So here's the first is the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, and the main steamship line only went as far as Rio de Janeiro. So if you were sending a letter from south of that, say Buenos Aires, there was a feeder steamship, and so in this case it was the Mercy that carried the letter from Buenos Aires to Rio, where it was transferred to the main Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, Tyne to Southampton in the UK, and then back across the Atlantic on this one was the North Atlantic Steamship Company. The Royal Mail Steam Packet extended that line south to Argentina. And so here's a letter a couple of years later where it was put on the Royal Mail Steam Packet in Argentina and went, on that steamship all the way to Southampton, and then again back across the Atlantic, this time on the Cunard line. One of the other British companies was the Pacific Steam Navigation Company. You see the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company far more often than Pacific Steam Navigation Company. And here's one from Montevideo to Liverpool and then back across to New York. And then there was also Tate and Company, another competing line, and another one that's much less common than the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company. This one from Brazil to Falmouth and then back across the Atlantic on the Cunard line. There was also a French packet line. And so here's a letter from Brazil that went to Bordeaux and then went across the channel to Southampton, and this one took the Hamburg America line back to New York. And so here's the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company. And so now you could go up the coast of the Americas and didn't have to cross the Atlantic twice. And so here's a letter from Brazil to New York. But you have the same problem, like I mentioned, with the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company. If you were south of Rio de Janeiro, you had to get your mail up to Rio to get to New York. And so here's one where they used the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company to get the letter from Argentina to Rio so that it could connect to the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company. And then here's another cover where it used the French packet line, which was renamed Line K, from Buenos Aires to Rio and then transferred to the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company to New York. Similarly, you see a lot of different routings used on mail from Puerto Rico. You can go via, a lot of it went via St. Thomas, but once you got to St. Thomas, it could take the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company right to New York. It could go to Cuba to New York. It could go via Halifax, Nova Scotia to New York. It could go direct to Cuba, or you could use private ships to carry the letter directly to New York. And actually, there were private ships also sailing to the east coast of South America. I didn't show those. So here's a cover carried by the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company. So it went from Puerto Rico by Royal Mail Steam Packet to St. Thomas, and then from St. Thomas direct to New York on the US and Brazil Mail Steamship Company. Here's paid in San Juan Crown Circle. This was most likely sent via Havana on the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, and then to New York on a U.S. steamship. Probably one of my favorite covers, because I collect, the cross-border mail between the U.S. and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. This is a letter that originated in San Juan. It was routed by the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company to St. Thomas, and then they put it on the Cunard feeder route that went via Bermuda to Halifax. And then from Halifax, it went overland to St. John, New Brunswick, and came back into Boston on a coastal steamer down the east, coast of Maine to Boston. Here's one carried by the Spanish packet from San Juan to Cuba, and then by U.S. steamship to New York. And here's a couple ship letters just showing you, how you could send stuff by merchant ship directly to a U.S. port here, one in New Haven and one in Philadelphia. And so some additional information. I did write an article about this in the Congress book in 2012. I mentioned the Hagley Museum and Library in Wilmington, Delaware, their web page, which has a fair amount of analysis of the Lanman and Kemp correspondence that they have. Yamil asked me about the Robert Dalton Harris publication. It's in the U.S. Postal Relations in the Western Hemisphere. That book was available from literature dealers. And then I'll also mention the U.S. Philatelic Classic Society, which has about 5,000 of these covers with the markings cut off, imaged and on the web page. And so that's the end of my talk.
Thank you, David. Very interesting
Thank you very much.
presentation.
There we go. I stopped the share. Oh, thank you. I assume you're clapping. You're all muted.
Yeah, there was a mute clapping. Any questions or comments for David?
We always do that, David. Okay, we clap if we like, during mute.
That's right. While we wait for other questions, I want to share with you a couple of covers, David, and if you can give me your opinion. These are covers from Peru, Lanman and Kemp covers, of course. Let me know when you see them.
Okay.
Okay. This is one, and I feel this is legit, is original. You mentioned that the A for the answer sometimes was removed, and that was one thing that I always question about this particular cover. So probably was there somewhere it was removed. It makes me feel that, of course, it went off of Peru with the Peruvian stamp without cancel, so maybe it was given directly to the VPO or the ship captain, and this one I believe is original. This came from Islay, which is south of Peru, so that kind of makes sense that it went without the Peruvian postmark. I have a second cover, which is this one, and I have seen quite a few of these Lanman and Kemp without the stamp, and they have the receiving or the incoming steamship. This one has the stamp, but this cancel is not known in Peru, at least not known to me. And I was wondering if there was a practice maybe by the incoming office in New York or somewhere, and if they saw a foreign stamp that wasn't canceled, they cancel it. Or if you have seen any other Lanman and Kemp cover that may have I will call it suspicious postmark on the stamp.
Yeah, there's stuff out there with suspicious postmarks. That doesn't look like a New York cancel to me.
Yeah. Right,
but
it's not a U.S. cancel. I mean, I've never seen it before. Okay.
But I don't know enough Peru postal history to say whether that, whether that could have been, a ship marking or something, or,
Yeah. For what I know of Peru, this postmark definitely is not Peruvian. Could be the C38, looks like by the bars, but it is not for sure. It's not the same size. So I always was suspicious of this cover.
To try a retro reveal, Henry.
Yeah.
I try it, I decompose it, and it looks, the ink looks right, but again, it's not Peruvian for sure.
Yeah.
Henry, even the circle of the, come back to the previous one, please. The circle is very irregular.
This one right here, right?
No, and the next one, the other one.
The next one over.
Yeah, that one. The circle is very irregular, especially here.
Well, it's a novel. It's a novel.
Yes.
Right.
Well, but things to me, they are not correctly prepared. I mean, looks to me as a fake.
Yeah, possibly. Just one comment, Henry, to your letters. Both of these letters have the light ink squiggle markings, which probably meant that they were red. Some of these letters didn't need to be answered. If you look at the contents, they're just acknowledging a receipt or something like that. And
oh, here you go. Yeah, because it's the same signature. You're right.
the lack of an A means that it may not have been. It may not have required an answer.
Here you go. Okay. Yeah.
If you look at the content.
Sure. This one for sure. I feel pretty strongly about this one to be good.
Genuine. Yeah.
This one, I have my reservations.
Yeah, I mean, I put it under UV light and see what.
Yeah.
See what it looks like.
Sure. Now, another question I have, David, getting back into this particular cover. So ignoring the stamp here, there were quite a few that I have seen from Peru and of course from other places that they have no other marking other than the incoming New York.
Yep.
So was there a practice that maybe the clients follow, that they send it in a package, someone at a different location was in charge of collecting them all and sending it in a packet and then opening New York and having was there any practice like that, or?
I mean, I've seen letters where a forwarding agent would bundle them and they would go into New York, through a forwarding agent. But I mean, that steamship marking is very common. New York, I mean, that was the only marking that you would typically see on something that came in on a US steamship into New York.
Okay. And by postal regulation, of course, every single letter, even if they came in a bundle, the bundle needed to be open and every single letter was supposed to get the inbound fee, right?
Yeah,
I don't know that was bundled.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
It may have been sent, I mean, groups of letters may have been sent to an intermediary forwarding agent, I don't know, let's say in Havana or a common place, where they were then mailed separately, unpaid, entering into New York and then rated, steamship 10 to be paid by the addressee.
Individually, yeah.
Individually, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of letters from Cuba to forwarding agents in New York, big letters, heavy letters, rated 80, 160 cents, that inside the only content says, please forward these letters. So they enclose a group of letters to be forwarded, usually to Europe.
Oh, okay.
David, have you ever exhibited something like this as a display exhibit, or?
Nope.
It would be an interesting, I mean, you have such a wide range of material that, except for the 3D stuff, well, which is doable, but difficult.
Yeah.
Would tell a very nice story.
Yeah, no, it's on my list of things to do.
Yeah. And what's the latest cover that you have encountered of the Lanman and Kemp?
I've found a couple airmail covers,
Oh, really? Wow.
30s or 40s. Actually, those were from Lanman and Kemp.
Mhm.
The latest addressed to them, I don't know, probably I've got one actually from Cuba or Puerto, is during the Spanish American War, and it has one of the
Oh, yeah, the POW.
not POW, but the Army postmarks.
Oh, yeah, the military station
Stations.
markings. Yeah,
Military state, yeah, that's what I was trying to,
military station. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. And I mean, there are some letters with very fancy frankings to Lanman and Kemp from exotic destinations. So it's not all the stamps were cut out for whatever reason, I guess.
Yeah.
Mauricio has his hand raised there.
Yeah. First, David, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. I would like to show a cover. Well, it's not mine. I wish it was my cover, but since you mentioned in your presentation that a lot of the covers from the archives had the stamps removed, let me share this with you guys. Just give me a second. Unfortunately, when they mutilated this cover, with the stamps, let me show it, put in presentation mode. Well, it's currently like this. It's on the web. Yeah, like that. Unfortunately, someone removed the stamps. We believe it could have looked. This cover originated here in Honduras. It should have looked something like this. Unfortunately, someone removed them, the stamps. If the stamp were have been left there, it would be the 5th cover with Honduran postage of the first issue known, but unfortunately someone removed them.
Yep.
And yeah, and as a curious fact, this is the only piece of mail from Honduras to the Lanman and Kemp on the Lanman and Kemp collection on the U.S. Philatelic Classic Society website. Do you know if everything has been scanned already, or
Everything that
they had?
the Classic Society had was scanned.
Oh,
I've
okay.
got, I believe, one letter from Honduras.
Oh. It
It
would be nice to see later, yeah. And just as a curious fact, well, here in Honduras, we still, well, at the beginning of the year, we still get those ones, which are issued by Lanman and Kemp. And curiously, on this year's, actually, we'll put it in highlight for everyone, just in a second. But in this year, there's a little article on their revenues and the history of the revenues that, yeah. Yeah, it says the first stamp, it was a 5/8 of cent revenue, and then they have the 3 cents, and then they have the label that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That is currently on the Florida water bottle. Yeah, but it's on this year's Bristol Almanac.
I'll have to look for that online.
Yeah, it should be online, but I don't know. This one is for countries Hispanoamericanos. I know that the editions, they change from place to place, but this is for my part of the world. So yeah, in this year's, you have that little article on the revenues and labels of Lanman and Kemp. And once again, thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
The cartoons, the tragic comedy cartoons.
Oh yeah, they also have that. Yeah.
Teenage frames.
How big of a company are they now? Because it seems that they were a lot bigger before than what they are today. And I don't know if those products continue to be popular, maybe in some
places.
countries.
Rafael got some recently, right, Rafael? You got
Yeah,
something from them recently.
I was going to make a joke to my brother. I bought a soap.
I want the router, yeah, router
Cost me
soap,
$5 for 2 bit soap.
Yeah, it's actually used in Wiccan like
Mhm.
voodoo and Wicca type stuff.
Santeria in
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
in the
Oh,
Caribbean.
that's very popular in
Absolutely.
our side of the world.
Really?
But
Yeah.
in New Orleans, I don't know if it's still there, but they had Dr. Zombie's House of Voodoo, and they had all
Yeah.
their Florida water to use in the
Mhm.
casting spells and
Well, in the Spanish Caribbean, Cuba, Puerto
Mhm.
Rico, and the Dominican Republic, botanicas, it sounds like botanical, but it's has nothing to do with plants. It has a lot to do with candles for
Witchcraft.
saints and for
Mhm.
African religious ceremonies.
Yeah.
They use a lot of Florida water in the ceremonies to spray all over the place. So
And
it's
the main person who used to advertise them was Walter Mercado, at least in Puerto Rico and the US.
Yeah, the fortune teller, yeah.
Well, there is always an industry if there is a product. So
No, they do still exist, and they have a website. You can buy their products wholesale, and they have the almanac online, which I will see if it has the article on the revenues. But yeah, it's there.
they may also continue with supplies for pharmacy. You mentioned about the chemical components that they use in the pharmacy. Maybe that's one of the main things that they still do. But I'm surprised that this company has survived for what, 200 plus years?
Yeah, 215 years.
Yeah,
That's really good.
it says here since
1808, yeah,
1808, yeah.
2015. David, one more question. You mentioned that the outbound mail from New York to different places always went through Europe. So in the case of our side of the world would be a double run to the Atlantic. Did they leverage the Panama crossing for places like Peru or Ecuador or Chile? Because all our outbound mail to Lanman and Kemp was always via Panama.
Yeah, the west, there were steamship routes that went up the west coast to Panama. There were British steamers, and so you'll frequently see the paid to Panama markings. And then there was a U.S. steamship line that went to, I can never remember,
the Pacific. Well, I mean,
which
there
one was on
were
the
many
Atlantic?
lines on the
I'm sorry?
Pacific. There were many lines both on the Caribbean side and in the Pacific, U.S.
Yeah.
companies.
But the U.S. ran to Panama from New York. That was the main line to get to California. So
Right.
U.S.
They
Mail
would pick
Steamship
up-
Company.
they would pick up the mail there. What I was saying on the East Coast, before there was the U.S. and Brazil mail steamship company, the only mail route, established mail route, you had to cross the Atlantic twice.
Yeah, the double run. Okay.
But as soon as the U.S. and Brazil mail steamship company started, I think almost all the mail started going that route.
Got it.
Because it was so much faster.
Okay, great. Jorge.
David, I have a question. Probably you can answer this. Probably not. Who had been the owners of this company over the years, and who are the owners today? Because yes, in Mexico, I'm in Mexico. I had seen these almanacs too, as well as in the US. But always they present a very traditional way, very similar. My idea always is that most of the products are for farmers, but for
Mhm.
sure there had been a corporation or a group of family members that they own this company over all these 200 and something years. Do you know who are them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never bothered to look at it's a corporation, so there should be filings
Mhm.
with the Secretary of State in New Jersey, but I've never gone to look
Okay.
to find out the
Okay.
ownership.
It could be interesting because probably they belong to a particular group, or probably it's a family,
Probably.
that they had kept the tradition so long. It's not easy to keep
Mhm.
a company that long, you see. alive, I mean,
No,
and active.
no.
But it's a private company, yeah, right, David? It's not a public,
No, it's
publicly
well,
traded.
it's a corporation. It could be a closely held corporation.
Yeah.
But I
So
mean, if it is a corporation, there should be stuff filed with the Secretary of State of New Jersey about who the officers are.
Mhm. But it's private, it's not public.
It's a corporation, but it's probably not publicly traded.
Private
Okay,
equity, yeah.
okay,
But
okay.
it's still a corporation, so it's a legal entity. You know, it's a legal person under the law, and so they should have to file something with the Secretary of State of New Jersey on who their owners are, who their agent is.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
You know,
Interesting.
It has to be
won't give you the-
profitable, 200
Mhm.
years
It won't-
surviving.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't have to file their profit, their taxes or anything if it's a closely held corporation, but
Mhm.
I think they still have to list who the directors are.
Yeah. Mauricio.
interesting.
Answering Jorge's question. Well, if you go to their website, let me just share this. The last one, family owned. It's talking about the company, a lot of this,
Yeah,
and the last one, family owned. Yeah. Well, we can write that. Maybe they reply. We can have a modern Lanman and Kemp cover. Who knows?
They may answer
But-
you with the A.
They may ask,
But
yeah, maybe.
But still, if it is a private corporation, family owned, to keep that for 200 years is not
Yeah.
easy.
Not
It's
easy,
not
yeah.
easy.
Well, even as Jorge mentioned, this is made like for farmers or very traditional lifestyles. Even on their website, it says using ceremonial rituals for cleansing, good luck, and protection. So they're marketing that
So here you go.
the target, those type of customers. So yeah.
Well, they have a niche market for sure.
Mhm.
I guess
Yeah,
there is not too
they
much
do.
competition there.
Yeah.
All shamans might be familiar with Lanman and Kemp.
Yeah.
I think for good luck at the next Mi Oficina meeting, we should bring some bottle of Florida water to
Yeah.
sprinkle on.
I do
Yeah.
agree.
We can start doing some santeria, yeah. maybe.
Yeah.
Some candles too, yeah.
Alfonso's gonna bring the chicken to cut the head off.
No.
Okay, you'll be named the official chairman of
Of
the
the Oficina,
Oficina.
yeah.
Rafael.
It's called Babalao, is it?
I know.
The main priest.
Oh, really? I will need to bring some maracas. For some reason, they always have maracas or something.
Oh, that reminds me, Galaxy 7 at the beginning of
Yeah.
Mi Oficina. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for David? No, I don't see.
One question more, David. Why there are a proportion between Cuba and Puerto Rico? I mean, I happen to have many from Puerto Rico. Even Mauricio got me some in England last time when he went to the show there. But why there's so many from Puerto Rico and Cuba? Was a major trading partner, or?
I guess that's where I guess that's where their products were the most popular or something.
Well, in the mid
I mean,
1800s.
those,
I'm sorry, go ahead, David. I apologize. Yeah.
oh, no, I think we were going to say the same thing, that those were the biggest economies in the Caribbean at that point.
Yeah, in the mid 1800s, 9% of the US trade was with Cuba, which was huge. And more than 50% of Cuban trade was with the US. So it gives you an idea of the reason for that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I even seen somebody had one of my relatives from the 1800s, because La Drogueria Blanco was really there and they used to sell that stuff. So someone had a letter with that. So it's kind of,
The
always
Florida
fun.
water.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, David, thank you very much. You clarify a lot of things related to Lanman and Kemp, which has been a
Thanks, David.
popular topic
Yeah.
all our series here for a few years.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Y el día de mañana.